Hello everyone. The medieval tavern, the unofficial news centre, the unsung heart of every town, and the only place where a knight, a farmer, and a bard could all get equally drunk and robbed, is where we start tonight, folks. It's a wild, smoky, and slightly sticky world. Under a thatched roof, it was more than just a place to drink. It was a place where illness, laughter, and danger all coexisted. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually love what I do here. Seeing who is joining us from around the globe is always exciting. Let us ease into tonight's voyage together by turning down the lights and possibly turning on a fan to provide a gentle background hum. You have walked along a muddy street that has a stench that combines smoke, horse, and shady soup. Naturally, everything is slick, including your single pair of shoes, because it is raining or has just stopped. You've been almost hit by a cart full of turnips twice, and you're hungry and exhausted. You must have a drink. In a medieval town, how would one locate a tavern? There are no Yelp reviews, no GPS, and no glowing signage. Your ears are what you do have. Simply follow the sound. A chorus of shouting, laughter, and an aggressive song about a goose can be heard somewhere beyond the fisherman shouting about his fresh river eels and the blacksmith's forge. And there it is, a skewed wooden structure that leans a little, as though the architecture itself has had too much. Above the door, a crudely painted wooden sign that is almost readable depicts. Is that a barrel, or a bear, or perhaps both? This is it anyway. Greetings from the tavern. The front step is slippery with ale, and the hefty, iron-hinged door creaks so loudly and dramatically that it could stand alone as entertainment. Warm air and the heady scent of mysterious meat, wet wool, stale beer, and smoke assaulted your face like a drunken handshake in an instant. You've succeeded. The ceiling is so low inside that inebriated men bang their heads and tall men duck. There is dirt on the floor, not literally or figuratively, but someone has laid down straw to make it look cleaner. It's not. There is no such thing as calm conversation, no waiters with menus, and no private booths. There are just two options for this medieval tavern: boisterous and closed because of fire. You see an open seat at an uneven bench by the fireplace, but you don't ask because it's damp. There's a dispute about a stolen chicken going on nearby. With a ladle still in his hand, another is unconscious. Beneath a table, a dog with one eye chews on a bone as if he were paying rent. And this is only the doorway, my friend. It smells like a night to remember even if you've just arrived, or simply forget. Warm, uneasy, and a little suspicious, the darkness envelops your senses like a damp wool blanket as the heavy tavern door closes behind you. Your eyes gradually get used to it. Against soot-stained walls, candlelight flickers, creating dancing shadows that give the impression that even the chairs may fight. The far corner's burning hearth serves as a heating source and an open flame hazard, not quite making its way out of the chimney, which could be filled with a dead crow. Smoke swirls languidly in the air. However, the fragrance is what affects you the most, not the heat or the loudness. The aroma of a medieval tavern is more emotionally charged than aromatic. Ale, warm, sour, and lavishly spilled over every surface are the top notes. Sweat beneath that. Years of it. Horse, human, and possibly a legendary creature. You have a blend that no perfumer has dared to bottle when you add a hint of mouldy bread, wet straw, and a whisper of boiling onions. Years' worth of initials, rudimentary sketches, and knife wounds are cut into the tables. With a sort of obstinate pride, they falter. The weight of bulky cloaks, filthy boots, and dubious choices makes the benches quiver. The ground? As promised, there was dirt, but it was covered with straw that was used to absorb spills, saliva, and the occasional comatose customer. You take your time, your foot will slip into something whose texture is best left uncharacterized if you make one mistake. The crowd is a dynamic, living phenomenon. Two men debate about the cost of a pig in one corner, while loud laughter breaks out in another. No one even bats an eye as a woman slaps a mug down so forcefully that half of her drink spills. At the adjacent table, a man looks at you with the puzzled expression of someone who is either lost in thought or has forgotten how chairs operate. Someone sneezes close by. Together, the entire left half of the room tilts away. Even still, there's a warm feeling here despite the overpowering onslaught on your contemporary sensibilities. There is life at the tavern. It's raw, harsh, and unadulterated. A community centre from the Middle Ages, but with 400% more screaming and less hygienic conditions. You locate your seat. It is somewhat wet, it's most likely cursed, but it's yours for now. The tavern's arrangement initially gives the impression that the furniture was placed there during an earthquake and then left there. No blueprint exists, no bar, no comfortable booths toward the rear. Simply a disorganized, sprawling jumble of benches, tables, barrels, and the odd wooden crate masquerading as a seat. Depending on how inebriated you are, everything is either too close together or too far apart. The sole true centerpiece is the hearth. One wall was surrounded by a large open fire that was trying its best to offer light, warmth, and a good dose of indoor smoke. People swarm around it like mug-wielding moths, seeking solace. The warmth is hoarded by those who have the best seats. Those who don't? That's the purpose of ale, then. Usually a thick wooden plank lying across two barrels. The bar, if you can call it that, sags beneath the weight of elbows, mugs, and jugs. The tavern keeper is standing behind it, juggling everything from pouring drinks to shouting commands, and giving that one person in the corner the death gaze since you still haven't paid for last Tuesday. No menus are available. Ask what's available, then get ready. Ale, or shut up and wait, is typically the response. The upstairs rooms are accessed by a small, possibly old, and undoubtedly splintery stairway. A boot dangling from one of the railing posts is visible if you squint. Nobody knows for sure if it's a warning or a decorative element. There are back rooms at some taverns. Perhaps it's for storage. Perhaps it's for illicit gambling. The last person to insult the barmaid may have been taken there and never seen again. Better not to inquire. Every surface has been meticulously polished by the elbows, boots, and spilled drinks of previous generations, and the windows are coated with greasy cloth or animal hide, while the walls are discolored by candle soot. A chicken, perhaps. It functions somehow either in spite of or as a result of the chaos. Everybody knows when to shout, when to duck, where to walk, and how to sit. It is alive even though it isn't organized. There is a ruler in every medieval tavern, and it is neither the tax collector or the local lord. The tavern keeper is it. Don't be deceived by their lack of a crown. They are in charge. Equal parts babysitter, bookkeeper, server, chef, and barroom justice enforcer. They don't tolerate any foolishness, and the tavern keeper is a one-person operation. If it's a man, he's probably grizzled, grumpy, barrel-armed, and carved from cured flesh and poor choices. If it's a woman, as is frequently the case, she can silence a room with a single glance and is sharper than a blacksmith's file. In any case, they have witnessed everything, heard worse, and, before breakfast, scrubbed blood out of straw. They give a nod to regulars, a suspicious look to visitors, and a tankard to the head to troublemakers. Since medieval literacy may be uncommon, tavern memory is fearsome, so behind the bar they mentally keep track of who has been paid, who owes, and who has had too many drinks. They do this without writing anything down. The tone is established by the tavern keeper. The place hums when people are feeling happy. Keep your jokes to yourself and drink quickly if they're not feeling well. They are the first to seize a club when a fight breaks out, the referee in every dispute, and the judge in every cheating scandal. The tavern keeper is not someone you should mess with. They are also all-knowing, who came to town with a false identity, who is in debt, and who is having an affair. Do you need information? Pay the bartender. Do you need protection? Take a seat close to them. Do you need a favor? I hope last week didn't end badly for you. Some people now carry barrels double their weight because they have an assistant, a son, daughter, spouse, or an orphan they sort of adopted. These helpers sweep floors, run beverages, and avoid getting trampled by inebriated people. The barkeeper, who keeps the ale flowing and the roof from collapsing into a riot, is in the center of what may appear to be a chaotic but actually delicate ecosystem. He commands everything like a storm god in an apron. At last, you take a seat on a groaning bench, avoiding elbows and stew that has spilled. It's time for the main event, the drink, and your boots are wet and your throat is dry. However, don't anticipate a finely crafted mug or a wine list. It is a tavern from the Middle Ages. Your options are few, indifferent, and potentially fatal. Let's begin with ale, the traditional beverage, unpasteurized, unfiltered, and typically brewed in the dog's sleeping quarters in the back room. It's thick, hazy, and frequently contains floaties, grain fragments, yeast, or perhaps a piece of the prior customer's beard. Since there is no ice, it isn't chilly, and you don't inquire as to how long it has been in the barrel. All you do is drink and hope. Mead and honey wine will follow. It sounds elegant, doesn't it? It's actually strong, delicious, and sometimes explosive. It could taste like sorrow and bee venom, or it could be delightful if the barkeeper cooked it themselves. Typically, it is provided to aristocrats, wedding guests, or that one bard who demands payment in mead or gold. After that, there's cider, which is produced from apples that were either plucked just now or fell to the ground 3 weeks ago. Acidic, tart, and presented in broken mugs that might be used as soup bowls in the morning. It is the preferred beverage in areas with lots of orchards, or for people who want a drink that is just strong enough to block out the scent of the man seated next to them. Wine, yes, in theory. However, it's probably watered down, soured, and served with a dash of sarcasm unless you're in southern Europe or among the local nobilities. Only lords, bishops, and the merchant who just sold 12 boxes of salt are allowed to drink good wine. Water, too. It's full with invisible death half the time, so that's a brave decision. Clean wells are uncommon, and boiling uses fuel. For this reason, even kids drink ale. Avoiding dying of dysentery before the age of 8 is more important than the buzz. Here, nobody is making cocktails or measuring shots. You use tin, clay, or wood cups to hold your beverages. Some still contain the stew from last night. You lift your mug, take a whiff, and take a sip. It's bitter and warm, yet somehow it's ideal. Because it's a good vintage in the medieval tavern, if it's wet and won't kill you right away. You made it through the drink? Seldom. Now your stomach growls, reminding you that you haven't eaten since morning, and your previous meal was mostly barley and grief. It's time to eat. Don't get too thrilled, though. No server, no menu, and no one at all inquires about any dietary requirements. In a medieval tavern, you don't place an order. Asking what's left makes you hope it's hot and only slightly enigmatic. Pottage is typically the center of attention at the tavern table, a hearty stew prepared with whatever vegetables, grains, and dubious proteins happen to be on hand that day. It's been cooking in the same pot since Monday, and it's now Thursday. Every day, new ingredients are introduced. Nothing is taken away. It's more of a culinary time capsule than a meal. Congrats if there's meat involved. Most likely, it's a rabbit, pigeon, or the unfortunate chicken who happened to wander too near the flames. It could be tasty if it's game meat, or it could be seasoned with desperation and aged beyond reason. Either clay or wood is used to make your bowl, your utensil, your fingertips, or your own. Most people carry their own knife, thus eating is a BYO cutlery affair. Additionally, don't anticipate napkins, just your tunic sleeve, or a communal rag that has witnessed some unforgettable events. There's also bread. It's heavy, black, and rugged. Not so much a food as a weapon. It was baked today if it's soft. If it's hard, it was baked last week. In any case, it goes nicely with cheese that has begun to take on a life of its own and smells like an old boot. Sometimes they're salted fish, sometimes pickled eggs. There are times when a pub may offer a special, which is simply a fancy way of expressing that we had too much of this on hand. Taste? Not required. Feelings of texture? Unpredictable. It's not too horrible, though, with the flickering firelight, the surrounding commotion, and the warmth of the meal in your hands. It fills. The temperature is high, and it may even be reassuring if you don't concentrate too much on what's floating in your bowl. Fine food is not the reason you are here. Eating like a survivor is your goal. You begin to notice the true entertainment once you've located your seat, preferably one that doesn't have a knife stuck in it. The individuals. The original social media feed is a medieval tavern, noisy, disorganized, only partially truthful, and totally dedicated to oversharing. A red-faced farmer to your left is already sipping his fourth ale while narrating the same tale of his cow giving birth in a sideways fashion. He gives you a shoulder slap in the middle of a conversation as if you were an old buddy or a suitable substitute for the pig he typically drinks with. At the far end of the room, a hooded stranger sits in shadows, drinking a drink carefully. He could be a bandit, a fugitive monk, or just a lousy eye contact person. In any case, unless you want to blend in behind the stables, you're not going to strike up a conversation with him. A soldier in tattered armor is telling a group of people stories of battle beside the hearth. Frenchmen talking swords and dragons are all part of his tale. It's untrue. Nobody is interested. His audience is giggling and his tankard is full. A sweaty, boisterous seller is yelling rates for grain that nobody has requested. Like a man pleading to be robbed by midnight, he takes gold coins out of his pouch. Two locals with focused expressions play dice on a distorted table. The other realizes that one of them is obviously cheating and lets it happen, most likely saving the altercation for when his ale runs out. The high notes of a love song that sounds eerily like a song he dreamed up are being strummed by a bard in the corner. No one minds he's wearing pants and he's in tune. That's already superior to the man from last night. Some of the women are tavern employees, while others are working for themselves. Sharp-eyed and self-assured, they are definitely not to be taken lightly. Depending on your tone, they will either laugh, flirt, or knock you down. Every now and then, kids run between legs, stealing coins or bread scraps. It's just part of the rhythm, and nobody stops them. Everyone is watching, drinking, conspiring, and pretending not to notice the man collapsed under the table. You're a member of the cast tonight, and this pub is more than just a place to dine and drink. It's a live, breathing show. Forget about ballads and lutes. A medieval tavern's true soundtrack is a symphony of turmoil rather than a single tune. The first sound is the clink of cups, dozens of them hitting wood in a drunken misfire, celebration, or negotiation. Some break entirely, while others clang merrily. Cheers are given to both. Then the laughter starts, a booming belly laugh that sounds like it came from a savage pig. Most of it is illogical. A farmer grins at his own joke about hay. Pottage makes a knight laugh. Each time someone yells duck, a monk lets out an uncontrollable wheeze. You rapidly get used to not asking. Like roosters in a coop, voices compete for dominance by layering over one another, each one louder than the others. Arguments, stories, yelling over taxes, and at least one individual misquoting scripture to win a wager are all present. The bartender swatted flies and shouted orders. Like a battle cry, a bartender yells at a man who tries to grab her, and someone keeps saying it, "Another round." The bard in the corner playing the same 4 chords on repeat with a half-tuned lute and 3 missing strings, periodically breaking into songs about lost love, found chickens, or noblemen who wore their pants sideways. Unless he starts singing about someone in the room, no one really pays attention. At that point, things may get either really dangerous or extremely funny. Something is spilled. The rafters vibrate as someone burps loudly. Another person tumbles from a bench and continues to speak from the ground, as if on purpose. A goat bleats and dogs bark in the background. Why is a goat present? And like thunderclaps in a wooden cavern, chairs scratch across the dirt. It's strangely rhythmic, but not serene. Sometimes there is a sudden silence in the room, not intentional. After precisely 3 seconds, someone bravely farts and the music resumes. This is the tavern's heartbeat, primal, boisterous, and unrelentingly alive. It's not background noise. It begins to make sense if you listen carefully enough. Disarray gives birth to a certain harmony. It only becomes louder the longer you stay, just like the rest of the tavern. The tavern changes after the alcohol begins to pour, and the stew begins to settle. It is more than just a place to dine and drink these days. Without the velvet ropes, and with a lot more shouting, it turns into a medieval casino. Everyone participates in the evening sport of gambling, from barefoot boys using borrowed dice to seasoned warriors. A cracked wooden table, a few copper pennies, and the hazy assurance that someone is going to lose their dignity are all that are present. No dealer, no pitmaster, no regulations. The preferred game is dice, which can be made from wood, bone, or anything else seems to be laying about. Like rolling thunder, they clatter across tabletops with a mix of cheers, moans, and accusations of witchcraft after each toss. Everyone uses the dice. Nobody trusts them. If you're in a more sophisticated area of town, there are also thick, hand-painted cards that are constantly missing 1 or 2 and are worn to the edges. Depending on who explains the rules, they change. Sometimes you're aiming to obtain the highest number, other times you're matching symbols or simply making it up as you go. With more slapping, it's similar to poker. Wages can take the form of cash, mugs, or animals. Indeed, one person staked their boots, another their freedom for the night, and still another wanted a nicer goat. He lost, spoiler alert. The regulars are slick. They roll gently, shuffle swiftly, and smile a bit too broadly. Cheating? It's half the fun, of course. A marked card here, a concealed die there, and an enigmatic cough when the fortunate player leans near. You can either risk being jumped or purchase a round if you win large. If you lose badly, you scoot your chair slowly back toward the door while grinning and acting as though you meant to. Arm wrestling, thumb wars, and the perennially popular game of who can drink the most without passing out are also common side games. While the loser gets a night beneath the table and a headache that lasts till the next market day, the winner gets plaudits. However, the intensity is intoxicating even when the stakes are ridiculous and the rules are unclear. Because luck isn't simply a game in a medieval bar, it's a risk involving your pride, your wallet, and maybe your trousers. A new type of performance takes place on stage as the night grows darker and the bar becomes warmer and more humid, one composed of music, lyrics, and self-assured gibberish. It's time for a medieval-style narrative. In the corner, a bard clears his throat while softly strumming at a lute that is only partially tuned, its strings squeaking like old boots. He lacks confidence, but he does have some missing teeth. He bursts into a ballad about bravery and heartbreak with a theatrical flourish about a knight who fell in love with a mermaid and drowned honorably while reciting poetry. No one believes him. Still, everyone pays attention. This is the way it is. You can choose to tell the truth. Entertainment is vital. Others assemble around the tables, patrons with a story to tell and ale-fueled boldness, but not bards. There is a man who claims to have survived a bear wrestle. According to another, he witnessed a witch transform a cow into a goat. A third believes he's related to Charlemagne on his mother's cousin's side. You won't believe this, and they're right, we don't. That's how every story starts. However we'd like to. Mistakes turn into myths, boasts turn into ballads, and someone's terrible joke turns back into a nice one. Another person recites a poem that was probably taken verbatim from a monk's scroll. Depending on how well or how much is performed, the audience may cheer, hoot, or throw bread. A minstrel or skald may be passing through if you're lucky. Music is traded for money, food, and even a place to sleep indoors by professionals who move from town to town. Their stories are lengthy, their songs are well rehearsed, and they can enthrall an audience. Risky. However, even they are aware of the tavern tale golden rule. A good story shouldn't be ruined by facts. Storytelling is more than just amusement in this smoke-filled room with the fire blazing and the cups sloshing. It's customary. There is a relationship. It's how you develop enemies, friends, and perhaps a lifelong drinking companion. By midnight, half of the tavern is acting out the tale of the one-legged hero who used a ladle to fend off 6 highwaymen. You forget it's all made up, you cheer, you laugh, because if the story is good enough, every liar in a medieval tavern is a legend. As the night progresses and the ale keeps flowing, something changes in the air, a kind of alcoholic bravery. Everyone is suddenly feeling romantic as the bard is midway through his 3rd song about adulterous shepherdesses. Greetings from medieval flirting. Subtlety has departed from the structure. Eye contact, or at least one eye straining slightly through a mead-induced haze, is the first step. A man with 2 remaining teeth leans across a bench and slurs. She throws a bread crust at his forehead in response, saying, "Milady, your beauty burns brighter than the hearth." There is a cheer in the room. Some take a more tactful approach, providing replenished mugs, awkward comments, or offers to help carry a dish so it doesn't spill. Spoiler, it still leaks. You're probably used to shoving away at least 3 would-be poets, 2 arm wrestlers, and 1 man who attempts to impress you by balancing a knife on his nose if you're a woman working in the tavern, a guest, or a traveling trader. It works sometimes. A black eye or an empty purse are the typical outcomes. Taverns provide more than merely flirting for individuals who are genuinely looking for company. Knowing who has money, who has charm, and who will faint before reaching the stairs, courtesans move across the room with a sense of ease. Although transactions are private, the ramifications are obvious. Envious lovers? Oh yes. A sly gaze, a straying hand, or a husband finding his wife laughing too much at the bard. Jest about bishops are the best ways to start a tavern brawl. They topple tables, mugs are weapons. It breaks a bench in 2, once more. Real sparks do, however, fly somewhere in the midst of all this mayhem. Over stew, a travelling stonemason and a bashful baker's daughter have a chuckle. A shared dislike of turnips unites 2 inebriated farmers. A nun is unintentionally flirted with by a monk. Even in the most raucous places, love, or something like it, survives. Because romance in the medieval tavern is equal parts chance, charm, and avoiding a face-first plunge into your bowl in the middle of a sentence. You could win someone over, you could get slapped. In any case, you will either remember it or at least hear about it the following day. It was inevitable. There may have been a drink spill. It is possible that someone accused another of cheating at dice. Perhaps 2 individuals made claims to the same bench and neither gave up. Or perhaps someone mentioned someone else's soup, goat, or mother. Not really important, it turns on all of a sudden. Once a haze of drinks and music, the bar suddenly comes alive. A stool flies, a tanker falls to the ground. "Hold my bread," someone shouts, and with the grace of a drunken catapult throw themselves over a bench. Nobody is shocked. Actually, the majority of people continue to drink. In the Middle Ages, bar fights were common. It's anticipated. It's almost a feature. Even though it sounds scary, it's typically more humorous than lethal. People misstep, swing wildly, and end up in someone's food. Shirts are torn, beards are snatched, and hair is tugged. With a club in one hand and a ladle in the other, the tavern keeper lets out a roar like to that of a general on the battlefield. Every now and again, someone joins the battle without knowing why. They jumped in, fists first, as soon as they saw activity. Others cheer, slide their mugs out of the way, or place casual bets. Weapons? Uncommon. Most people are aware of this. A simple altercation at a tavern might become a full-fledged tavern legend when someone pulls a blade. Furthermore, nobody wants to be barred from the only establishment that offers warm ale and hot meals. Someone eventually falls to the ground and remains there. After bumping into a wall, another person believes it's a good idea to sit down and reflect on their life. Like a candle in a tavern, the conflict ends abruptly and without fanfare. The odd part comes next. When it's done, it's done. Within 10 minutes, everyone, including the man with the bleeding nose, is laughing once more after the fighters are separated, the mugs are replenished, and a song is started. Just anecdotes, bruises, and perhaps a new moniker like Benchbreaker Bill or One-Eyed Arnold. No lawsuits, no resentment. Because a good fight is merely a part of a good night in a medieval tavern. Uncomfortable, messy, and strangely forming bonds. And it's only more entertainment if nobody is seriously harmed. Your tummy is full of mystery stew and slightly fermented cider after the brawl has ended and the bard has fainted in the middle of the ballad. It's time to go to sleep, or try to. However, don't anticipate a bed with feathers and linens that smell of lavender. This is not a spa, it's a medieval tavern. If the tavern has rooms, they're probably a rickety staircase away, past sloped flooring and rafters low enough to test the strength of your skull upstairs. The rooms are cramped, chilly, and completely communal. There is no such thing as privacy. Strangers are sleeping next to you. Some are snoring loudly like church bells, while others are dreaming loudly in languages you don't understand. Beds? In technical terms, the majority are mattresses filled with straw, thin, lumpy, and swarming with what people from the Middle Ages affectionately referred to as friends. Not for comfort, but as a protective tactic, you lie down completely dressed, boots on, and a blade beneath your pillow. Smells and blankets are exchanged. Additionally, garlic will become a personal element of your dreams if someone has it in the past. You sleep downstairs on a bench beneath a table or simply in a corner by the fireplace, cuddled up next to a dog that may or may not be a tavern dog if you're too inebriated or too impoverished for a room. You will likely get sneezed on, walked on, and maybe used as a footrest. There is never much silence in the tavern. There's always a log popping in the fire, a fart echoing through the rafters, or someone murmuring in their sleep, even after the last fight has been patched up and the final mug has been drained. And yet you fall asleep somehow. Although it's not clean or comfy, it's sufficiently safe. The pub owner watches with one eye open and a club in hand. The fire keeps the worst of the cold at bay, and the commotion turns into a familiar, human, and alive lullaby of its own. You'll wake up with a sore neck, a parched tongue, and a bruise that you may not have gotten. However, you spend a few hours sleeping among travelers, outlaws, farmers, and idiots, just snoring straw, and the dim hope that your boots will still be there in the morning. No monarchs, no silence. Dawn enters like an unexpected visitor, piercing your eyelids with ruthless tenacity as pale light seeps through the shutters. Overnight, the tavern has become quieter. Not exactly, but quieter in a defeated sense. Someone's boot is on your chest, you open one eye and someone else is mumbling about sheep taxes while they sleep. Beneath a table, snoring, the bard is holding his treasure like a lover. A bird pecks at the bread crusts from yesterday as it jumps around the floor. Nobody asks where it originated. The room is smoky and cold now that the fire has subsided. A few customers start to move, moaning like injured fighters from wars waged alone inside their own skulls. One man decides that today isn't worth it, sits up, looks about, and then lies back down. As they naturally are, the tavern keeper is already up, scattering mugs, raking straw into new heaps, warming stuff in a pot that smells inviting, but also a little vindictive. They glance at the corpses on the ground before slamming a ladle like a hellish mourning bell against a mug. That's your wake-up call. Get up or go out. A breakfast buffet is not available. There's more pottage, thicker than last night if you're lucky. Ale is diluted, bread is reheated, and nobody has the strength to grumble. Some customers claim to be living a clean lifestyle by just submerging their heads in a barrel of rainwater outside. You look in your bag, better than anticipated, 2 coins and a button. Your boots? I'm still here. They belong to you, but one of them has a bite mark on it, a victory. Some new faces appear, travellers, early risers, employees who require a drink before handling animals, cabs, or worst, neighbours. Like a beast slowly awakening, the tavern starts to stir once again. Someone begins to recount a tale from the previous evening. Of course, it has already altered. A ghost was called forth by the bard's song, and there were now 2 fights. Everybody nods as if it were gospel. It was a chaotic night. It's a soggy, dirty, and regretful morning. You still smile, though, because you managed to survive it somehow. You've already experienced the perspiration, smoke, and sticky ale beneath your boots. You've made it through the pottage, the flirting, the shouting, and maybe even a flying bench. And one thing emerges from all of it. The medieval tavern served as more than just a place to have a drink. It served as the community's lifeblood. News spread through the bar in a world without phones, newspapers, or social media. From a foreign port, a coastal trader could share rumors. The front lines of the fight could be described by a soldier. Even if the words of a bard's songs varied every night, they might still bring people together. Here, people may connect. Craftsmen drank next to farmers. Thieves and pilgrims exchanged bread. Before the second round, strangers become friends, or at least drinking partners. Depending on how the cards rolled, social classes became hazy, rumors started, alliances were formed, and grudges were either buried or stoked. Business also took place in the tavern. Contracts were shattered, deals were made, and cider was spilled. It was simultaneously a confessional, a court, and a theatre stage. In one evening, you might be married, lose your handbag, start a dispute, or get a job. It also provided something else. Something you couldn't pray for in a chapel or purchase at the market. Relief. From the cold, from the job, from the unending gravity of living in the Middle Ages. You could sit by a fire for a few hours, listen to a poor joke, sing a worse song, and momentarily forget how difficult the outside world was. The lunch had more bones than broth, and the bed was scratchy, even if the ale was warm. You felt as though you were among the living in the tavern. And that was a big deal in a time when anything could happen to you at any time, from illness to war to a harsh winter. Therefore, you were purchasing more than simply a drink when you entered a medieval tavern. You were purchasing a sense of community, a narrative, and perhaps a sleeping area where the fire was still burning if the floor wasn't too crowded. Because the tavern existed long before cafes, pubs, and coffee shops, out loud, unclean, sincere, and utterly remarkable. Nefertiti was a mysterious woman before she became the most famous face of ancient Egypt, captured in a bust of limestone with high cheekbones and a calm, confident look. The beautiful one has come, is what her name implies. However, no one is certain of her origins. Some people think she was the sister of Akhenaten or the daughter of Ai, a prominent Egyptian official. She was sent to Egypt as a foreign princess in a marital match, according to some. Although there is disagreement on her origins, her impact cannot be denied. Nefertiti makes an abrupt, spectacular, and transformational appearance in the historical record. She joins Akhenaten as an equal partner in a reign that will upend Egypt's theological and cultural underpinnings rather than as a submissive queen. Together they would destroy centuries of custom, cast aside the gods, and declare the sun disk Aten to be the one real god. Nefertiti wasn't merely observing from the throne. It was a drastic, almost heretical action. She was conducting rituals, presenting sacrifices, and even smiting enemies, a task usually performed by male pharaohs in artwork. Nefertiti was constantly present, in contrast to other queens who were pushed to the side. Compared to Akhenaten himself, she is featured in more works of art from the era. She is not dressed in subservience in these representations. She physically holds power in her hands and stands tall, sometimes dwarfing others. Furthermore, her closeness to Akhenaten on a political and spiritual level suggested something more in a society where pharaohs were revered as gods. She might have been more than just queen. She might have been a co-ruler. However, there was some strain during this ascent. Egypt was unprepared for the turmoil. The destruction of their temples and gods infuriated the ancient clergy. In order to break with tradition, the capital relocated to Akhenaten, which is now Amarna. Nefertiti was there throughout it all, her name shouted in hymns to the sun, her figure carved onto stone walls. Despite her prominence in life, her death is a total disappearance. No body, no tomb, no known end. Nothing but quiet. It is as though history abruptly decided to ignore her genius after demonstrating it. And maybe that's when her legend really starts. The pharaoh Akhenaten, who altered everything, must be met before you can comprehend Nefertiti's ascent. That was not his birth name. Originally he was Amenhotep IV, a prince descended from a 1,000-year-old line of gods and custom. However, he experienced a change that some refer to as inspiration and others as crazy. He disregarded the powerful god Amun and revealed a new reality after ascending to the throne. The sun itself, the Aten, was the sole deity deserving of devotion. This change was not merely a religious one. Egyptian civilization's foundation was broken by an earthquake. Imagine if a culture centered on temples, priests, and rituals was suddenly informed that their gods were not real and that their devotion was no longer necessary. Akhenaten not only advocated monotheism, but also put it into practice. Amun's temples were closed, statues were destroyed, monuments bearing his name were chiseled off, and entire cities were left deserted. Akhenaten constructed a new structure in their stead. Akhetaten, a city devoted entirely to Aten, where the city would be illuminated by sacred light as the sun rose between the cliffs. Nefertiti was by his side the entire time, not just as a silent companion, but as an active participant. She is depicted worshipping Aten with the same awe as Akhenaten in the period's reliefs. They are frequently shown with their daughters, heads cocked toward the bright sun. It was a portrait of a family that had never been seen in Egyptian art before. Even the art style altered, becoming fluid, exaggerated, and occasionally even personal, instead of rigid and conventional. Under the sun, the king and queen are seen kissing, playing with their kids and praying while wearing silky robes. In this new universe, Nefertiti was everywhere. She even occasionally eclipsed her husband. According to some historians, she actually possessed political power and may have even served as co-regent. She is referred to in some inscriptions as Neferuaten, a name some people think she adopted when she started to rule independently. Whether Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, cunning, or need is uncertain, but it was obvious. This revolution might not have endured as long without Nefertiti. However, revolutions are brittle. The gods are not amenable to being swapped out. What about the people? They were silently observing, anticipating the restoration of the previous order. At her most powerful, Nefertiti was more than just a queen. She had become a symbol of heavenly femininity, regal authority, and beauty. Even though Egypt had already witnessed magnificent queens like Amos Nefertari and Hatshepsut, Nefertiti's presence seemed unique. She wasn't using war to seize power or operating in secret. As a living goddess, she was working alongside her husband to change Egypt's spiritual and cultural landscape in real time. Under the rays of Aten, she gave birth to Akhenaten's 6 daughters, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpaten, and others, all of whom were regularly portrayed in family scenes. Strangely, there were never any verified sons. This was a historical enigma as well as a political issue in a kingdom that was fixated on genealogy. Was it fate, or was there another factor at work? Akhenaten may have had sons with other spouses, or, more controversially, with Nefertiti herself, according to some, which has led to uncomfortable speculations and current speculation that range from the lurid to the speculative. There is no doubt that her image revolved around parenthood. In artwork, Nefertiti is shown holding her kids, their small arms extending upward to caress her cheeks. These statues aren't chilly and rigid. These are private, passionate, dazzling moments that have been etched into stone. In a time when pharaohs were frequently viewed as far-off gods, Nefertiti's representation as a protective mother humanized the divine. Her iconography did, however, have a much more potent aspect. Nefertiti wears the blue crown often worn by male monarchs in a number of representations. Without Akhenaten by her side, she is depicted riding chariots, smiting foes and making sacrifices. These gestures weren't symbolic. This was a queen carrying out a king's holy duties. It alludes to a subtle yet profound reality. Nefertiti might have been getting ready for more than just a romantic relationship. It's possible that she was getting ready to govern. According to historical rumors, Nefertiti assumed greater governing duties when Akhenaten's health started to deteriorate, either as a result of stress or inherited illnesses. The record, however, begins to wane at this point. She disappears from view during the last years of Akhenaten's rule. There was no verified burial, no funeral inscriptions, and no fanfare. Was she young when she passed away? Did she lose her position of authority? Or was she on the verge of becoming something more than a queen, something that history attempted and failed to eradicate? Nefertiti was revered in songs carved into walls and ruled alongside a revolutionary pharaoh one day. Then she was gone like a breath in the desert wind. No queen in ancient Egypt has ever been so conspicuous. However, the records go uncannily quiet during the year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year rule. Her image slips from the artwork, and her name vanishes from the inscriptions. No grave, no proclamation of death, no scene of grieving. Her absence is more than odd for a lady who has played such a significant role in Egypt's cultural turmoil. It is a historical black hole. What then became of her? The simplest explanation is offered by one theory. She passed away. Even royalty was at risk when giving birth. Around this same period, Nefertiti's second daughter, Meketaten, also vanishes from the records, which could suggest a twofold tragedy, a mother and daughter lost in the same terrible moment. However, if such were the case, why was there no temple, no tribute, and no lavish funeral? This woman was considered a divinity. The script does not call for a tranquil death. Others make a far more political suggestion. Nefertiti might have lost favor. Perhaps things changed in the royal court. She might have been marginalized by Akhenaten, who was growing more and more alone, perhaps in favor of another consort. Some speculate that she might have been succeeded by a co-ruler known as Smenkhkare, a mysterious character who makes a fleeting appearance in history. Was this heir a man, half-brother, or did Smenkhkare Nefertiti go by a different name? The idea that Nefertiti never vanished is the most thrilling one. She changed. There is evidence that during the last years of Akhenaten's monarchy, a person by the name of Neferneferuaten was in power. This person even referred to Akhenaten as her adored husband and employed feminine grammar in her inscriptions. Is it possible that this was Nefertiti, who was crowned pharaoh herself? In that case, she would have been one of the very few female kings in Egyptian history, following in the footsteps of Hatshepsut. However, even this theory is a waste of time. The reign of Neferneferuaten ends suddenly, and a more recognizable name takes over. The child king Tutankhaten, who would later become Tutankhamun, would undo the changes his parents had made and bring back the ancient gods. Nefertiti's reign was brief if she did rule alone. She ruled like a ghost queen, visible only in fragments, half-carved cartouches, and broken relics, like a puzzle without its focal point, assuming she was Smenkhkare or Neferneferuaten. Thus, the most influential woman in Egypt vanishes as abruptly as she appeared. However, her legend? That was only starting to come together. A new figure, a young monarch not old enough to wield a scepter, appeared as the dust of Amarna started to settle. His name was Tutankhaten, which was eventually changed to Tutankhamun. He would go on to become the most well-known pharaoh in history, not because of his actions during his lifetime, but rather because of the riches discovered in his unaltered tomb. But this is what's important here. His mother was who? Frustratingly, there is no historical record. Akhenaten was most likely his father. However, there is still uncertainty around his mother's identity. According to some academics, Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others hypothesize that she might have been his biological mother, citing chronology and artwork that suggests he was a little toddler when she made her last public appearances. It would make sense if Nefertiti was actually the mother of Tutankhamun. His decisions to undo his father's religious revolution may not have been all his own, and it is evident that someone with a firm hand supervised his early rule. And that's when the mystery becomes more complex. During the tenuous rule of Tutankhamun, who was in charge of the ship? When the boy king assumed the throne, he was just 9 years old. A religious empire cannot be restored by a youngster on their own. Behind the scenes, someone was there. Someone with knowledge of public symbolism, religion, and court politics. Maybe it was Nefertiti ruling in the background. Or was it her potential father, the high priest Ai, or maybe both, cooperating to purge Amarna's mayhem and restore Egypt to its ancient deities? A gilded shrine discovered inside Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the more convincing pieces of evidence. It depicts a woman who has a striking resemblance to Nefertiti anointing the young monarch. If that was her, she might not have truly disappeared, but rather remained in a more subdued form at the center of power. Nevertheless, we are left with only pieces in the absence of a recognized tomb and a verified body. Her fingerprints can be found all over if she did lead Tutankhamun, but her name has been removed from temples and omitted from lists of kings, as if someone had attempted to obliterate the memory of a woman who previously held divine authority. The irony is rich, though, because the world discovered her narrative while looking for Tutankhamun's, her image would be revived by his popularity. Nefertiti left no verified tomb despite being a queen, priestess, and potential pharaoh at the height of Egypt's most radical period. Her death rites, sarcophagus, funerary mask, and inscription whispering her last words to the gods are not depicted on any monument. She seemed to have vanished. For more than a century, Egyptologists have been troubled by this omission. How could one of the most influential women in Egyptian history have been forgotten in a society that was preoccupied with the afterlife and where all nobles were mummified, embalmed, and buried with instructions for the soul's journey? There are several theories. One hypothesis is that in the final years of the Amarna period, she was buried quickly and without a ceremony. Maybe the new regime saw her as dangerous because of her radical past. In an attempt to obliterate the memory of Akhenaten's apostasy, her tomb might have been demolished and her name vandalized. After all, revenge in stone-cut hieroglyphs was frequent, and the return to old gods happened quickly. Her tomb was never really lost, according to another, more intriguing idea. It was either still hidden or misidentified. According to some scholars, she is actually hidden below Tutankhamun's tomb's walls in the Valley of the Kings. Radar scans of King Tut's renowned tomb, KV62 in 2015, suggested the presence of potential subterranean rooms. Was Nefertiti buried a few inches away, buried under layers of wealth and history, shut off and forgotten? The globe was captivated by that concept. Egyptologists held their breath, a queen resting just out of reach. However, more scans produced conflicting findings. Funding dried up, excavations stalled, and Nefertiti fell back into myth once more. But her absence is noticeable. Her likeness is preserved in stone and pigment in dozens, if not hundreds, of our pictures. Now in Berlin, her bust continues to gaze across museum glass with inexplicable grace, as though she is waiting or knows something we don't. Every year, new excavations in Amarna and the valley continue, and rumors start to circulate. Would her secrets eventually be revealed in a secluded chamber? Could her real name be spelled in a cartouche of lost sand? Or will she always be the enigma, an incomplete phrase in the Egypt story? The hunt for Nefertiti never really ceased. Rather, it simply grew more intense. So even if history did bury her, it was short-lived. Why do we still commemorate Nefertiti if her body was never recognized and her tomb was never located? The solution can be found in Berlin's Neues Museum, a painted limestone sculpture that has enthralled people worldwide since its rediscovery in 1912, behind museum glass and under gentle lighting. The Nefertiti bust. Her long neck is elegant, her blue crown is distinctive, and her features are so sophisticated they almost seem contemporary as she looks forward with calm and composure. It's possible that one eye was left incomplete on purpose, or that it was overlooked in the last days of the workshop. Even so, she remains eternal and unforgettable despite her incompleteness. Ludwig Borchardt, a German archaeologist, found the bust amid the remains of Thutmose's Amarna studio. As soon as he cleared the dust and exposed her face, he realized what he had discovered. There is no point in discussing what he wrote in his diary. You must see it for yourself. Once the world did, Nefertiti transcended history and became a universal representation of beauty, strength, and ancient mystery. However, there is debate around even her bust. Egypt has been demanding the repatriation of the treasure for decades, and Germany purchased it when antiquities laws were lax. She is home to the Egyptians in the place where she was once kissed by the sun and stood under its rays. Germany, however, has declined. They say that because of her fragility, she is not safe to travel. Some claim it's a matter of prestige. Nefertiti attracts large audiences. After all, she is their Mona Lisa. Nevertheless, her existence, no matter where she is, has altered the perception of ancient women worldwide. Not all of her attractiveness was passive. Her bust conveys a sense of authority, assertiveness, and even challenge. She appears to have made choices, kept secrets, and altered the path of empires. She also did. It's amazing how one silent, delicate sculpture may bring back a long-lost person. Her tomb might never be located. We might never find out how she passed away. However, Nefertiti accomplished something remarkable with this bust. She was immortalized in human memory rather than in gold. Even though the face is motionless, what does it convey? Across the ages, something still speaks louder than ever. Between what we know and what we wish to believe, between stone and silence, lies the narrative of Nefertiti. Few people in ancient history have evoked such deep mystery and unrelenting intrigue. She is paradoxical. While being one of the most well-documented women of her era, nothing is known about her. She has been envisioned as a variety of things over the ages. She was seen by some as the living embodiment of divine beauty, a goddess in human form. She was seen by some as a political genius, the driving force behind the throne, or perhaps the throne itself. According to some, she is a romantic character who is tragically lost in the sands of revolution. Others portray her as cruel and ambitious, skillfully and strategically handling a falling empire. What do we actually know, though? She was more than just a royal wife. As we know, she has imagery comparable to that of royalty. Her participation in royal events, religious rituals, and even combat scenes shows that she is not only close to authority, but also actively using it. Her presence, composure, and sheer command of the visual and spiritual language of her era allowed her to carve out her own place in a patriarchal world without resorting to rebellion. We are aware that she played a key role in one of the most daring religious revolutions in history. The monotheistic sun cult was symbolized by Nefertiti, even though Akhenaten may have conceived of it. She served as a link between the Aten above and the people below, the human embodiment of a divine ideal. She served more than simply the gods. She was the representation of them. We also know that her memory was all but lost after she vanished. Her name was forgotten amid the backlash against Akhenaten's government. They destroyed her statues. They vandalized her inscriptions, her historical function purposefully obscured. 3,000 years later, we are still muttering her name. Why? Because myths are able to endure in situations when facts cannot. Because a woman enters a realm where time cannot reach her, when she becomes both an icon and a mystery. Because occasionally the questions are more loud than the responses, and perhaps, just possibly, that was Nefertiti's desire. Not to be explained, but to be remembered. To be admired rather than confined. To live forever as a queen of unending speculation rather than as a woman of one grave. Even though it has been over 3,000 years since Nefertiti last set foot under the Egyptian sun, her shadow can still be seen all over the world. It can be seen splashed over the pages of novels and films, whispered through academic halls and etched in museum glass. She hasn't disappeared into the past like other historical characters do. In fact, she becomes bigger over time. She has an allure that is hard to resist. Not only the aesthetic appeal. Beauty is nothing new to us. The enigma is that, although she is well aware that we can never fully comprehend her, the purposeful voids in her biography seem to be a challenge, a taunt. As a result, she has transcended her historical status. She has evolved into a stereotype. Nefertiti is reinterpreted in the image of each generation. She was a mysterious, obedient, exotic queen in the beginning of the 20th century. She was erased by patriarchy and became a symbol of female power in the feminist wave. She is portrayed in contemporary media as an African queen, a style icon, a political figure, and even a potential pharaoh. Through her imagination rather than realities, she has experienced 1,000-second lives. Perhaps, however, that is the most appropriate afterlife. Immortality in ancient Egypt extended beyond mummification. It has to do with memory. You survived if people heard your name, saw your picture, or heard your tale again. You could dine with the gods, traverse the field of reeds, and live on beyond death. Whether on purpose or by accident, Nefertiti has accomplished it. People from different continents speak her name. One of the most recognizable faces in human history is hers. Despite its flaws, her story nevertheless attracts attention. Her greatest legacy, then, was not, in a sense, trapped under desert stone or carved into a tomb. It was this persistent interest. She left behind a life that was partly seen, half deleted, and completely unforgettable, a perfect enigma. Her ultimate act of power might have been to become ageless rather than merely govern an empire, influence religion, or produce royal daughters. The lovely one who has arrived, Nefertiti, never really went away. She endures in our curiosity, in our need to remember the women history has attempted to forget. She lives in the eternal act of being sought for, not in wealth or fame. What could be more eternal than that? A dragon sleeps coiled in China where the breeze hums through bamboo groves and the clouds hang low. However, it is not a fable or a legendary fire-breathing beast. Centuries of rough hands and patient vision have crafted this monster out of stone and soil. Known to the locals as the dragon's backbone, the Longji rice terraces are a series of curves that shimmer with water, rice, and ancient pride as they ripple across the mountainside like scales. The terraces appear to be a sleeping creature from a distance, the hills rippling with precise rhythm, each layer rising and falling like a living thing's sinew. You will discover something even more vibrant if you take a closer look. At dawn, the morning mist covers the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. Saplings flutter in the breeze, and water runs in gentle whispers along meticulously excavated channels. The construction of these terraces was not hurried. The Zhuang and Yao people, who are ethnic minority with strong ties to the mountains, decided to tame the slopes rather than abandon them more than 700 years ago, marking the beginning of their story. With limited flat ground and no machinery, they turned to the mountain and posed the straightforward query, how do we feed ourselves here? Generations were needed to find the solution. They created the hills year after year, inch by inch, using only bamboo baskets and stone tools. They taught the ground to breathe with them as they constructed each level, in addition to shaping it. Slope became nourishment, and rainfall became a resource. Where gravity had reigned, rice, the staple of life, started to grow. Eventually, the terraces took on the appearance of a dragon in repose, strong, immortal, and sacred. There was more to this than just farming. It was peace, a tacit agreement between nature and man. The mountain wasn't squandered, and it wasn't made to bend forcefully in any way. Rather, they worked with the soil, listening to the wind as it followed the water, and sculpting it into swells and curves. In addition to providing food for entire towns today, the dragon's backbone serves as a reminder of the strength that comes from waiting. Here rests a dragon that was never pursued, but rather carved dream by dream, layer by layer, in a world that is advancing at a breakneck speed. You enter a world shaped by perseverance when you stroll among the Longji rice terraces. Here there are no corporate survey markings, machine traces, or illusions. The marks of human perseverance are what stretch across these mountains. Stone by stone, every bend, every slope, and every water drop has been placed by hands that were aware of the land's pulse. When the Zhuang and Yao peoples first saw these rugged and steep hillsides centuries ago, they saw no barriers. They recognized a chance. If only they could get the soil to listen, there was still hope up here among the rocky peaks, even though the lowlands and fertile valleys had already been seized and sown. They started without any big equipment. Time-worn backs held baskets of muck and rubble, wooden shovels and stone hoes. Hand-stacked stone walls maintained the terraces in place as they gradually developed into horizontal veins throughout the mountain. These were deliberate cuts, not unintentional ones. In order to transport water from one layer to the next without wasting any, each level needed to be precisely balanced. If a part is too steep, the water will rush. If it is too flat, it will stagnate. One mistake could lead to the collapse of an entire section. Therefore, they used generations of intuition to measure rather than rulers. Youngsters learned from their parents. The mountain eventually gave in, not with submission, but with trust, as the elders observed the changing of the seasons. And the outcome? A landscape that flows with nature, defying it. These terraces ascend like a spiral stairway to the sky from the base of the valley to the cloud-kissed peaks. As though the mountain itself grew them, they elegantly reflect the geography. However, these bends were not formed by the mountain. People did, without concrete, engines, or degrees in architecture. Timely, only trial and error, simply the conviction that life can be supported by terrain regardless of how steep it is. The terraces are continuously used, cultivated, maintained, and revered today. No shortcuts, no bulldozers. The old ways have endured because they have proven something uncommon, not because they are resistant to the future. When sufficiently ingrained, such tradition can withstand any adversity. Water is the dragon's blood if its backbone is made up of muscle and bone. Tracing ancient pathways that slip from mountaintop springs into every terrace below, it flows silently without the use of pumps or turbines. It's no accident that this hydraulic choreography exists. The terraces have survived for ages because of their secret existence. Narrow ditches and earthen canals near the summit of the mountain catch rainwater and natural springs. Gravity then turns into the farmer's quiet ally. In each field, the water pools gently before pouring into the next, as it drops through terrace after terrace. This smooth, flowing design guarantees that each rice patch gets what it requires. Neither more nor less. Neither switches nor valves are present. Subtle wood or stone gates that are manually and habitually adjusted provide control. The next terrace might flood if the first one overflows. There could be a drought if one leaks. In order to protect this fragile system, the villagers walk the ridges every day, monitoring, regulating, and listening to the sound of flow. It's more like playing an instrument than farming. The entire song is off with only one incorrect note. However, rice is not the only use of the water. It reflects the sky. The paddies turn like glass when the terraces are first inundated in the spring. On a clear night, they reflect the light, the clouds, and even the stars. The view is frequently described by visitors as bizarre, as if the mountain has transformed into a living mirror that reflects both the land and heavens. The summer follows. The green stalks thicken the water. As the mirror disappears, movement takes its place, with rippled rice plants swaying like an emerald sea in the wind. The stream shimmers through the golden ripening grain in the fall. And when farming stops in the winter, the flowing river is replaced with frost and snow. The conduits are still there, silent veins waiting for spring, while the dragon sleeps. Here, time is measured by moisture, not by hours, but by the aroma of moist soil, the sound of frogs returning, and the first trickle of mountain thaw. The residents of Longji still measure time in seasons and drops, even though the rest of the world calculates time in seconds. As a result, the dragon lives in water ripples, throbbing softly through a living work of art made of stone and soil, rather than in fire and flight. In the Longji Mountains, water marks the start of spring rather than flowers. Streams trickle down as the snow melts on the higher peaks, bringing life to the terraces that wait. The paddies that resemble mirrors are prepared. As the dragon stirs, the villagers get ready to plant the first seed, a ritual that connects them to all previous generations. There is merely quiet movement and no big declaration. With the mist, farmers of all ages rise. With baskets resting on their backs and straw caps low over their eyes, they stroll barefoot down the narrow slopes. The smell of mountain wind and wet earth fills the air. Days after flooding, the paddies now gleam like gleaming emerald. Machines have never been able to do this task. One by one, line by line, each rice seedling that has been raised in nursery beds is manually moved. The laborers enter the chilly water and use their fingers to gently press the fragile stalks into the dirt. There's something almost hallowed about the rhythm. Arm extended, hand pressed, back bent, repeat. Children imitate their elders by splashing in the shallows and following them all day, sometimes for weeks. Instead of using textbooks, they learn by standing in the water, experiencing the resistance of the mud, and observing the spacing. Here, knowledge is lived rather than spoken. Planting is a ceremony that involves more than just work. Songs are sung and offerings are presented to the mountain spirits. Elders in some villages bless the first few seedlings by scattering them. Every field that is planted is a pledge to the land, the ancestors, and the future generations. No one sprints the mountain or rushes the dragon. The tempo is leisurely. Rather, planting turns into a quiet meditation, a slow dance of patience, purpose, and human and natural. And like whispers, green shoots emerge from the wet fields as the days go by. From now on, optimism will be cultivated alongside rice on the terraces. Every row is a silent protest against hunger and hurry, and every seed is a prayer. The cycle then starts over, this time with hands in mud and hearts in the sky instead of noise or fire. The mountain is breathing, the dragon is waking, and one seed at a time, the future is being sown. The heartbeats of the dragon's backbone can be found tucked away in the curves of the terraces and scattered throughout the ridgelines. Communities like as Jinkeng, Dajai, and Ping'an. These communities are living museums of history, with each house, walkway, and balcony clinging to the mountain like an enduring memory. To protect them from the rain and the steep hill, the wooden dwellings are raised on stilts. Their sloped black rooftops reflect the lines of the terraces they look out over. They like wooden lanterns floating on green seas when viewed from above. Life is straightforward, cozy, and incredibly communal within. A house is shared by generations. Wood fires are used to cook meals. The mountain air is filled with the aroma of bamboo smoke and rice wine. These individuals are members of the Zhuang and Red Yao ethnic minority, each of which has its own language, traditions, and folklore. The Yao women will be immediately recognizable to you. On top of their heads, their long black hair, which hasn't been cut since childhood, is coiled into beautiful shapes. When bathing in the river, some people let it fall like silk waterfalls, a vision so exquisite it verges on myth. Traditions endure even as modernity creeps up the mountain trails. Indigo-dyed hand-woven clothing, quiet rooms with creaking wooden looms. At village celebrations, music was played on bronze drums and reed pipes. Ritual dances are still performed at weddings. There is still song to greet the harvest. Here, being hospitable is a reflex rather than a transaction. Stories from seniors who remember the mountain before electricity came are served to guests, along with tea made from native leaves and rice wine in carved gourds. They talk of ghosts who still watch over the fields, of ancestors who first created the hills, and of dragons in the mist. Additionally, the rhythm of village life remains essentially unaltered, despite the fact that tourism today attracts tourists from all over the world. The rice continues to grow. The seasons are still marked by the customs. Like the people, the terraces survive. Change can be absorbed gradually and gently, like water going down one level at a time rather than by fighting it. Life is not hurried here among the coils of the dragon. It moves, it reverberates, it recalls. Exploring Longji's terraces is like traversing layers of myth. The hills are made of more than simply rock and dirt. They are alive with tales that are passed down on the wind and murmured through bamboo forests. These mountains represent more than just terrain to the locals. These are holy creatures, molded by the gods, protected by the spirits, and inhabited by stories that have been passed down through the ages. A sleeping dragon, whose body spans across the hills, is the subject of the most persistent legend. The terraces themselves climb in coils along its spine. The locals think that the mountain's curves are caused by the dragon scales, which rise and fall in response to breath, rather than by human activity. The dragon is supposed to awaken, breathing softly while it sleeps, when mist from the valley rolls in and coats the paddies in white. The terraces were created by divine benevolence, according to another story. The ancestors prayed to the sky while climbing the mountains during a famine. The gods were moved by their dedication and gave them instructions to cut the hills into steps so that rice might grow. They also delivered rain. The dragon seemed to direct the people's hands as they complied. Since then, people have respected the mountain by never yelling in the fields or felling trees without first praying. Books don't include these beliefs. They exist in the silence maintained on foggy mornings, in the hymns chanted during planting, and in the incense lit before a new growing season. These stories are told to children as part of the land, not as fiction. Laughing at the dragon could lead to a poor harvest. Disrespecting the spirits invites drought or flood. The water also contains spirits. Before the spring water is let into the terraces for the first time each year, some farmers continue to make offerings. A prayer whispered under one's breath, a few drips of rice wine. Tradition is as natural as lacing a shoe, not for show. And there's something sacred in the air, whether or not you believe in dragons. Perhaps it's the quiet. The clouds might be to blame. Or perhaps it's the subliminal sense that this location is more than just human labor. This tale, which is still being told, was recorded in stone, water, and rice rather than ink. The backbone of the dragon was a secret for ages, hidden away in the mountains and only known by those who lived there. However, no location, no matter how holy, is ever truly unaffected. The road arrived, the cables came next. Alongside the farmers, tourists, cameras, and iPhones ascended the hills. And the terraces, old and worn, had to respond to a question they had never had to before. In the present world, how do you survive? Initially, there was concern. Some were worried that developers would buy the mountain piece by piece. Wood would be replaced by concrete. Costumes would be based on that culture. However, the Longji people did more than simply survive. They adjusted. One cautious thread at a time, the present will be woven into the past rather than abandoned. The villagers started hosting visitors in their houses as family vacations, not as resorts. Tourists consume regional cuisine, such as freshly harvested wild greens and sticky rice steaming in bamboo. They still wake up to the sound of roosters in their wooden stilt cottages. This isn't a show-off experience. It has been lived, sincere, actual, as well as the farming It goes on. Locals continue to hand-plant, harvest and flood the terraces every season using sickles that have been worn smooth over ages. Children assist in the fields at dusk while attending school during the day. While tourism may generate revenue, rice is what gives life. One helps the other. Both are necessary. While many young villagers return, some have moved to the cities. The terraces have a certain allure that goes beyond sentimentality. Water gliding through the channels is the sound, the paddy's reflection of the stars, the patience that the mountains impart. Yes, local festivals have become noisier. Where there used to be drums, there are now microphones. Sacred springs are marked with signs in both Mandarin and English. The ceremonies, however, continue. They continue to make offerings. The songs are still led by elders. Change was not resisted by the dragon's backbone. It took it in gracefully, with equilibrium. The terraces endure because they change with time, not because they are immobile. Flexing, adapting, but it never breaks. Longji serves as silent evidence in a time when tradition is frequently forsaken in favor of advancement. If it so chooses, that advancement can move slowly. That especially when they are this lovely, the traditional traditions still have a place in the modern world. No two places on the dragon's backbone are ever the same. It changes its colors, sheds its skin, and changes its mood with every season. The terraces, which are clothed in rhythm as well as light, change in weeks, whereas cities undergo changes in years. Standing with them for a year is like watching a mountain breathe. The arrival of spring is like a mirror. The quiet water reflects the sky like silver glass as the terraces are flooded in preparation for planting. Clouds drift beneath your feet as well as above. Tourists talk of passing through heaven. Although the fields appear vacant, they are brimming with possibilities. Life stirs beneath the surface. A straight summer blankets the hills in a waterfall of emerald. The terraces appear to roll in all directions like ribbons of velvet from a distance. It's humid and warm. From the paddies, frogs call. With their hats bobbing like little sails on a jade sea, farmers labor from dawn till nightfall while knee-deep in water. Autumn is the best. Time to harvest. The terraces sparkle with grain as the rice ages and burns in the sunlight. Drums reverberate across the towns and the fields tremble in the wind. Families get together. They sing songs. The sticky rice is done. It's a celebration rather than merely a season. Awakened, the dragon offers its prize. The mountain becomes silent in the winter. The water drains. The terraces are empty. Occasionally, snow falls, sprinkling the steps with a gentle white. The frost sticks to the walls like lace at other times. There are no voices, no tools, just silence on the field. The dragon waits, rests, and sleeps. A separate poem is written for each season. Winter rests, autumn nourishes, summer flourishes, and spring reflects. Longji's beauty lies not just in its shape, but also in its cycle, its unresisting acceptance of time, and its silent transformations that never require announcement. The terraces aren't frozen for anyone, but photographers are here chasing the light in the hopes of capturing something timeless. They breathe, they move, and they gently educate us that beauty is a rhythm, a practice, and a promise that is reborn with each passing season. The dragon then spins once more, this time with wind, grain, and water, instead of roar or flame. The terraces are peaceful, curving, and sculpted into the mountainside. They are more than just fields in the end. Hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation, a promise handed down through the generations. The backbone of the dragon is more than just a technical marvel or agricultural marvel. It tells the tale of what occurs when people decide to coexist with the land rather than fight it. There were simpler routes. Longji's forefathers had the option of relocating to valleys or pursuing softer terrain, but they chose to remain. They fed towns on a mountainside by studying the slope, listening to the stone, and following the stream. By doing this, they normalized the impossible. There are lessons to be learned from every curve, not only about rice, but also about patience, legacy, and care. It took ages to construct these terraces, not years or even decades. No machine can duplicate the wisdom carved into each stone wall by grizzled hands and silent perseverance, and there is no quick route to harmony. However, there is nothing frozen about them. The terraces are living things that change and adapt to the environment, human requirements, and global shape. Their secret is that they were always fluid and never stiff. The terraces are still grounded even as the displays and signals of the modern world climb the slopes. Because their roots are more than just dirt, they change but never completely disappear. They are found in ritual, in story, and in the timeless act of sowing a seed and having faith in the sky. There is a relationship between humanity and the soil that is renewed with each harvest and is signed with sweat and sun. To walk the dragon's backbone is to observe this contract. It serves as a reminder that brilliance does not always roar, and that development does not necessarily equate to speed. Like a creek slipping over stone, it can murmur at times. And maybe that's why the terraces resonate with so many people, farmers, tourists, and dreamers, because they symbolize things we've all but forgotten. That the things that last the longest in this life are made with time, rhythm, and humility rather than force. The mountain remembers, the people persevere, and the dragon slumbers. The enormous sphinx is gaze, and the pyramids, imposing silhouettes, bring the majority of tourists to Giza to look up at the sky. Few, however, inquire as to what is beneath the sand, the Nile, and millennia worth of lost currents. Because a weird story is stirring in the calm shallows close to the old settlement of Abu Rawash, which is only a short distance from the Giza Plateau. It alludes to a massive, neglected and deteriorated underwater sphinx. For years, local fishermen have whispered about it, a feline shape with a smooth back that appears too symmetrical to be natural, half hidden in mud and wet debris. Parts of the Nile appear during droughts when its waters recede. Curves, grooves, and what some claim is a carved paw made of stone that is impossible to wear, but clearly formed by hands. It is not located near any tourist attractions. There are no tour buses lingering around, no velvet ropes or guideposts, just a place full of brackish water, reeds, and solitude. The terrain itself feels strange, charged, as if memory clings to it, according to explorers who have visited. Sonar scans have detected geometric patterns and what seem to be intentionally placed bricks beneath the murk. The assertions that this figure, a sphinx-like structure submerged close to Giza, may actually precede the pyramids by millennia rather than decades, however, are what really shock me. The conventional chronology of Egyptian civilization would be upended if it were true. The Great Sphinx is anchored in the mainstream timeline at approximately 2500 BCE, but if it is indeed carved, this aquatic figure may date to a time when the Sahara was still green and the Nile rushed through a wetter, lusher landscape. As a result of water and wishful thinking, skeptics naturally reject it as a misidentified rock formation. However, there are more questions than answers raised by the grooves, curves, and alignment with astronomical markers. The site has not yet been excavated. It has been mostly disregarded by official archaeologists. Maybe it's nothing. It might be everything, a remnant of a world lost to time and water, as well as Egypt's past. The so-called underwater sphinx is currently waiting, silent, and not sleeping. If it could talk, one wonders what secrets it may reveal and why so many people are so adamant about not listening. In the 1980s, the underwater sphinx legend went from being a whispered folktale to a worldwide sensation. Strange claims of a huge lion-bodied creature partially submerged close to the Giza Plateau started to appear around that time, according to a few independent scholars and divers. Early images were blurry, ambiguous, and frequently disregarded. However, they ignited curiosity and, more dangerously, doubt, things that could never be placed back in the bottle. An amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have spotted a weathered monument down beneath silt and flood layers during a brief drought window was one of the most outspoken early proponents. He said the figure wasn't a lone rock or a trick of erosion. It had symmetry, legs, and geometry, and there was even a slight hint of a carved face. This, of course, put the conventional story to the test. The discipline of Egyptology is based on timeliness and organization. The Great Sphinx and the Giza pyramids were built during the time of Pharaoh Khafre, approximately 2500 BCE, according to the majority of academics. It would be necessary to reconsider not only Egyptian history, but also the chronology of human civilization in general, if an older, partially submerged sphinx were to be proposed. The reaction from mainstream scholars was cautious, if not contemptuous. The allegation could not be regarded seriously in the absence of stratigraphic investigations, carbon dating, or peer-reviewed excavation. Many contended that the so-called underwater sphinx was probably a naturally occurring limestone rock that had been eroded by sediments and flooded by the Nile for thousands of years. They noted that nature frequently imitates the deliberate in Egypt. Time, water, and wind are all good sculptors, but the pictures continued to circulate. Strange patterns that were too regular, too smooth, and too suggestive were still visible in the sonar measurements. The theorists followed. The enigma sparked the creation of stories by authors, filmmakers, and fringe historians who suggested that the Sphinx was a remnant of a vanished civilization, possibly Atlantean or pre-dynastic Egyptian, that perished in a flood that ravaged the Sahara. They suggested that what was beneath the Nile might be much older than is generally believed, cited water erosion patterns on the original Great Sphinx, and made arguments for vanished technology. The ground stayed motionless as the argument became louder. The Sphinx, if that is what it is, stayed exactly where it had always been, buried in silt, locked between myth and muck, and no museum claimed it or an official dig was started. In addition to being controversial, the notion that something near Giza might have existed before the pyramids is novel. Egypt's history did not start in the 4th dynasty if the underwater Sphinx is more than a coincidence or a result of erosion. It started earlier, in prehistoric times, when the Nile roamed more widely, more untamedly, and with less predictability, and the Sahara was a verdant savanna. Geologist Dr. Robert Schoch's study of the Great Sphinx itself in the 1990s gave rise to this theory. He maintained that rainfall, not wind and sand, was responsible for the extensive vertical weathering on the Sphinx's cage. The Giza Plateau had not experienced heavy, prolonged ancient rainfall since at least 7000 BCE. This caused the Sphinx's potential date to be pushed back thousands of years, long before the first pharaohs etched their names into the stone. Could water have concealed an even older sibling if it sculpted the first Sphinx? The so-called underwater Sphinx is located close to historic flood basins in a lower area. Beneath silt and seasonal water, some satellite data and ground-penetrating radar points to potential foundations, rectangular outlines, and intentional contouring. The site might be older than the Sphinx according to these indications. It might have originated when there was nothing hieroglyphically carved in Egypt. The gap between the end of the Ice Age and the emergence of the first dynasties is one of the missing chapters in Egypt, according to proponents of the hypothesis. The Sahara changed from wet grasslands to dry desert, the Nile changed its route, and civilizations might have arisen and vanished at this time. Traditional historians find it hard to believe that a pre-literate, pre-pharaonic ancient people could have created a monument of this size. Is it, though? Approximately 9600 BCE, hunter-gatherers constructed Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It predates Stonehenge by thousands of years and has megalithic pillars with engraved animals. Is Egypt hiding something similar? A prehistoric society that used stone to mark the terrain before their stories were recorded. Papyrus? Everything we know about human history would be altered if the underwater Sphinx had been constructed during that period. It would allude not just to lost ruins, but also to a bygone era that might have whispered to Giza's architects, leaving behind more than myth, possibly a monument that sank and was subsequently forgotten. Stone doesn't lie. It remembers, and it tells a subdued but tenacious tale of water and time around the location of the alleged submerged Sphinx. Long before the desert dried up, long before the Nile found its usual path, and long before the pharaohs left their mark on history, sediment layers, erosion markings, and flood patterns all allude to a past. Strange erosion markings, smooth rounded grooves that indicate extended exposure to flowing water, not wind or sand, as well as rainfall and movement. Forces that haven't been present in this area for thousands of years are noted by geologists who have studied photos and data from the site at Abu Rawash. The Great Sphinx itself has been the subject of similar debates, particularly with regard to its enclosure wall. The standard timelines detractors point out that the deep vertical cracks on the trench around the Sphinx are more like rainfall, heavy, continuous prehistoric rain, than wind erosion. The same signal is now visible at the potential underwater Sphinx site, although it is concealed behind a shallow flood basin. Parts of the building, including lion-like haunches, shoulders, and a foundation that appears too flat to be natural, are believed to emerge into view during times of low Nile flow during excavation. The basin is geologically active with a high clay content and indications of violently varying ancient water tables, according to researchers who have investigated the area. There is a lot of wear on the stone, but not at random. Wear flows in lines that are purposefully carved and then drowned, following the structure's natural contour. The early Holocene, when Egypt was wetter, greener, and more vulnerable to severe flooding, is when some of the sediment layers surrounding the site were formed. Had a monument been carved at that time, it might have endured for centuries until being buried beneath the drifting silt of the Nile, engulfed by muck and forgotten by relocating populations. Water doesn't form symmetry, cut pores, establish aligned foundations, or echo the shape of a known sphinx just a few miles away, according to skeptics. They also claim that this is all a coincidence, that natural structures are being pushed into myth by wishful eyes. This raises a deeper question. What else has water taken with it if it has wiped this monument from the landscape? Even more pressing is the question of how much of history is still concealed. Why hasn't the underwater Sphinx been unearthed if it is indeed there, silent, carved, and ancient? Why is it still hidden under muck and quiet, disregarded by governments, ignored by archaeologists, and abandoned to the tides? Like the artifact itself, the answer is hidden beneath the surface. With good reason, Egypt's archaeological institutions are guarded. Through rigorous methods, stringent excavation guidelines, and an emphasis on scholarly consensus, the country protects its ancient legacy. Permits, money, international oversight, and, above all, institutional permission are necessary for the excavation of any site, particularly one that defies the conventional time frame, and that approval frequently depends on a single unwritten rule. Don't alter Egypt's past without a ton of indisputable proof. And the issue is that there has never been a formal state-sponsored excavation of the so-called underwater Sphinx. Without official support, the conclusions of independent researchers, foreign academics, and fringe theorists who have studied the field remain anecdotal, intriguing, but not definitive. The Nile itself is another problem. The river is a dynamic entity. Over decades it floods, recedes, and changes. The monument's purported location is prone to flooding and is frequently underwater for a large portion of the year. draining the area, rerouting water, safeguarding neighboring ecosystems, and repairing structural damage brought on by centuries of sediment pressure would all be necessary for excavation. Years, if not decades, would pass just for that. Political factors come next. If confirmed, a finding of this size would upset more than just academic schedules. It might upset national pride, upend conventional wisdom, and draw a media frenzy that Egypt might not be ready to embrace. The Ministry of Antiquities would rather highlight findings that uphold Egypt's magnificence than cast doubt on its ancient past. There are rumors that some organizations may already know more than they disclose and that early research has been conducted in secret. However, in the absence of government pronouncements, peer-reviewed research, or public records, these allegations veer into conspiracy. The monument is still buried as a result. It lies beneath mud and skepticism, whether intentionally or by mistake. It is an odd irony that one of the country's biggest mysteries may be right in front of us unrecognized, unresearched and unrecorded by the official record of time in a place that is fixated on conserving its ancient past. However, nothing is ever truly buried. The Sphinx was more than just a sculpture to the ancient Egyptians. It was a mystery, a guardian, a god, and a symbol. The Sphinx symbolized strength combined with knowledge, physical power subdued by royal intellect, with the head of a man and the body of a lion. It was positioned at the intersections of the divine and the mortal as a cosmic guard. The Great Sphinx of Giza is, of course, the most well-known. Standing 66 feet tall and facing the rising sun, it has protected the plateau and pharaohs' graves for more than 4,000 years. The precise origin of it is still up for debate. Some claim Khafre erected it. Others contend that its face has been etched over time, making it possibly much older. What if there were a second Sphinx only a few kilometers away, concealed, weathered, and perhaps much older? Everything would be different. Twin Sphinxes at Giza are not mentioned in any historical records. There is silence in ancient texts. However, references to guardians surrounding sacred areas in a balanced position can be found in later Greco-Roman history. Symmetry is considered sacrosanct in Egyptian architecture. Twin sculptures, twin obelisks, and twin avenues of lions are frequently found in temples. Sphinx twins, why not? According to some academics, the so-called underwater Sphinx may actually be a prototype rather than a replica. Later, a larger-scale reproduction of the pre-dynastic version was made. If accurate, it implies that the concept of the Sphinx originated with a lost culture whose stories were preserved, adapted, and enhanced rather than with dynastic builders. Furthermore, the monument might not even be constrained by the pharaoh's worldview. If it existed before writing, it might have served astrological, ceremonial, or even commemorative purposes, commemorating a forgotten god, an event, or a flood. It's no coincidence that the lion shape exists. Lions stood for the horizon, the entrance to dawn and nightfall in ancient Egypt. An east-facing sphinx forever observes the sun's rebirth. That holy act was frozen in stone when one was carved. Imagine now that one is carved in front of the pyramids, waiting, guarding, and aligned. Not only would history be altered, but Egypt's mythology would also be reinterpreted as the final vestige of an even older culture rather than the dawn of civilization. Additionally, the possibility that this sign is dormant underwater makes it even more appropriate for a protector of vanished worlds. Deeper than stone or soil, a silent chasm has arisen as rumors of the submerged Sphinx spread around the globe. Traditional Egyptology, which is methodical, disciplined, and grounded in scholarly consensus, is on one side. A rising number of independent scholars, alternative historians, and inquisitive minds, on the other hand, feel that something remarkable is being missed. Evidence, peer-reviewed research, stratigraphy, inscriptions, and radiocarbon dates are all demanded by mainstream academics. They have good reason to be concerned. There are many naturally occurring rock formations in Egypt that have animal or human-like features, and misidentifying them can result in false information. After all, archaeology requires caution. The past is brittle. Once broken by irresponsible hands or media sensationalism, it cannot be repaired. However, caution has turned into complacency for others. Independent researchers, many of whom are outside the field professional scientists or engineers, contend that the undersea sphinx and related abnormalities merit more investigation. They cite high-resolution satellite photos that exhibit unusual symmetry, LiDAR scans that reveal rectangular foundations hidden beneath mud layers, and erosion patterns that appear to have been intentionally created rather than chaotically formed. They also challenge the political justifications for remaining silent. Money from tourists passes through well-known monuments. A new sphinx might upend Egypt's narrative and power, particularly if it challenges the conventional date. They imply that the concern is of altering everything rather than of deception. Today, the underwater sphinx is frequently featured in books, documentaries, podcasts, and conferences. It now serves as a warning story and a rallying cry for hidden history. Open excavation is advocated. Critics caution about pseudo-scientific claims. As usual, the truth gets lost in the midst, buried behind voices as dense as the silt of the Nile. The gap is emotional as well as academic. It has to do with how we view the past. Do we pursue the clues put just out of grasp, or do we simply believe what has been verified? That question is forced into the open by the submerged sphinx. It's a litmus test for our level of curiosity, not just a rock or relic. And both sides will keep debating it over a monument that says nothing but has the power to alter everything as long as it is unearthed. A mystery hidden in plain sight has an eerie quality, particularly when it emerges from the dirt with ancient quiet and dons the visage of a lion. The allure of the alleged submerged sphinx near Giza is irresistible, regardless of its veracity. It arouses in us a desire to recall as well as to explore, because at its core the tale of a lost monument speaks to a human sense of loss that predates archaeology. Cities collapse, languages perish, and civilizations disappear beneath sand, ash, and waves. We have always lived next to ruins. We search the past for identity as well as answers. Who are we? To what extent do our stories go back in time? And in our haste for advancement, what have we overlooked? The underwater sphinx becomes more than just a relic if it is authentic and was carved by hand before history was written. It becomes a voice from a chapter we were unaware existed. A relic from a time when humans might have had a different understanding of the stars, a deeper respect for the land, or a mythology that we can only speculate about. Some people think it is part of a highly developed prehistoric culture that was lost to a worldwide calamity. This notion is frequently written off as fringe. However, the emotional intensity is still there whether or not that is true. One must face the fragility of civilization by imagining a monument that was carved long before the pyramids, flooded by rising waters, and ultimately destroyed. And maybe that's why the tale endures. It serves as a reminder that civilizations come and go, that time is not linear, and that if a river runs for a long enough period of time, even stone can vanish. More significantly, though, it serves as a reminder that there is still more to uncover, and that the world still contains mysteries not covered in textbooks. The undersea sphinx is a unique phenomenon, an unsolved question, a potential, a mystery that has not been resolved by drones or algorithms in an age of immediate responses and worldwide data. And it already has significance because it makes us wonder, regardless of whether it turns out to be natural rock or a forgotten monument. I wonder if the history is more complex than we previously believed. Ponder whether myth retains memory. Imagine what's waiting for someone to notice what's just beneath the surface. Whether sculpted or unintentional, verified or denied, the underwater Sphinx of Giza is nonetheless where it has always been. beneath the exterior. Under the weight of time, the water, and the mud, it talks quietly in the absence of answers while having no name, plaque, or limelight. There are still monuments buried and waiting for us in Egypt for everyone we have discovered. Some are too delicate to find. Others drown under layers of silt and mystery, lost to the shifting Nile. And some, like this one, are overlooked in plain sight, not because they are unimportant, but rather because they raise issues that we aren't yet prepared to address. Perhaps that's why the underwater Sphinx is so strong, not its age or size, but its quiet. It compels us to face the boundaries of our knowledge and the unease of what we may have missed. Actually, it might never be dug up. Tradition, politics, and money create walls that are higher than any grave. However, that does not imply that it is unimportant. On the contrary, because of its inherent obscurity, the monument has become a mirror reflecting not just what is buried there, but also what we choose to remember and the things we decide to forget. It also serves as a reminder that history is open to interpretation. It is a living puzzle that is dispersed over shorelines and landscapes, waiting to be disturbed by a change in tide, a shift in perspective, or a bold inquiry. The whole form might eventually rise as the water recedes. Face and all pause. Radar might validate what myth has long guessed. Or maybe, like a whisper between stones, the mystery will continue to be passed down from one generation to the next. However, the underwater Sphinx already fulfills its primary function. Whether it is a monument or a fantasy, it stimulates the imagination. And perhaps that is its greatest gift in a world steeped in certainty. Perhaps the oldest things aren't just buried in time or sand. Perhaps they are interred within us, in our need to discover, to recall, and to hold on to the idea that the past still exists and is just waiting to be discovered someplace, whether it be in the desert or beneath the waters.